Antifa in mainstream media and Twitter. YouTube is purging channels like ours, so subscribe to us on BitChute. Click that link below. This is the video version of this webpage, which has all the links, all the sources, etc. As usual, the webpage version of this video has a lot more than what I could squeeze in this video. So see the link below? Okay, enough about that. Antifa in mainstream media and Twitter. Vox, Huffington Post, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, The New Republic, and others apparently employ Antifa propagandists and activists as journalists, quote unquote. And the guy that researched and reported on this was shut down on Twitter shortly after his report was published by Quillette. Surprise, surprise. I'm going to tell you in this video, folks, that a lot of the media and Twitter are Antifa. It sounds like something that Jalix owns, wink wink, would say, on Winfowars. But yeah, it is true. By definition, they are Antifa. And this is by their definition. So there you go. They are Antifa. Literally speaking, I mean literally, not just the fake literally, but literally speaking, they are Antifa. They engage in what they call anti-fascist action, which can range from propaganda in the media to bombs or anything in between. And as many of our videos document, those who they call fascist and whom they attack or spread propaganda about or both are almost always nothing of the sort. Anyway, I told you so. Yep, they're in the media. They're also in politics too. Almost every single article I have ever read about Antifa or the Proud Boys or Patriot Prayer and so on contain lies and propaganda in service of Antifa. And I do have a few videos in which I get these propagandists on the phone and give them a chance to justify their propaganda in service of Antifa. And folks, it takes a lot of time to just get one person on the phone for 30 seconds. Oh my goodness, it takes so much work, which is why I do it so rarely. It's just more time than anyone has. But anyway, folks, in the webpage version, there are links to some of our videos in which we either just expose their lies or actually get them on the phone, give them a chance, and then it becomes clear that they're just lying. More than one of them threatened to sue me, by the way. Anyway, let's move on. May 15th. Here is a Twitter thread by Lenahan, apparently a doctor, that has since been taken down, but which has been archived right here. I am tempted to go through all this, and it is important stuff, but we just don't have the time in this video. Besides, he will summarize all this in an article anyway, as we'll see. But we should note that he does give some examples of journalists who don't just follow Antifa Twitter accounts, but also proudly proclaim themselves to be Antifa in some cases, or simply have a bias in favor of Antifa in their reporting. He makes this very clear. Now, I mention this because, as we will see, critics will argue that they labeled these journalists as Antifa just because they follow Antifa Twitter accounts. And again, this is not correct. They don't just follow Antifa Twitter accounts, they act as Antifa and therefore are Antifa. These critics can see this just as clearly as we can right here. I mean, this is what they're reacting to. So they see these tweets right here and they choose to pretend that he didn't tweet these right here. And as we'll see in his article, Lenahan does in fact say quite clearly that yes, just because someone follows Antifa accounts on Twitter does not mean that they are Antifa. And yet these critics are going to pretend he never said these things. So anyway, let's move on. In response to this, It's Going Down, which is arguably the largest English language Antifa propaganda outlet, tweeted this. German pedagogy professor, I don't know how to say his first name, Lenahan, and self-described, quote, online extremism researcher, unquote, today attacked anti-fascists and journalists. He also outed himself as the well-known far-right troll Progdad, banned from Twitter in 2018. It seems he really got, quote, into his research, unquote. They also tweeted, while banned from Twitter, Eoin, I guess is how I say Lenahan's first name, I'm not sure, continued to post on Instagram under the title Progdad TV as a caricature and celebration of far-right tropes held against leftists, progressives, and Antifa. Yeah, I'm sure they're far-right tropes and not maybe just say, for example, classical liberal tropes of things that just say normal, sane leftists notice about and, communicate about the far-left wackos behind It's Going Down, for example. I'm sure. Like the racist OK sign. It's not at all just a joke amongst people who are just not far left. Sure, no, it means you're a Nazi. Yeah, whatever. We will return to this Progdad and Progdad TV thing later on. May 17th, Lenahan's writings were reported on by the Red State with journos from prominent news publications found to have working relationships with Antifa by Brandon Morse. May 21st, PG Media put out this, Report shows online ties linking HuffPost, The Guardian, and the SPLC to Antifa by Tyler O'Neill. May 29th, Quillette tweeted out this with a link to the infamous article by Lenahan in which he discusses his findings. Remember, as we say in the title of one of our past videos, Twitter's CEO doesn't just knowingly hire Antifa terrorists, he follows them. And I'm mentioning this because shortly after this tweet, Twitter suspended or deleted, according to Russian Times, Lenahan's Twitter account. The Daily Caller would publish this article on June 15th, which includes this, which is apparently a real screenshot. And you can see right here, this is for ProgDad TV. The second ProgDad account. You know, the first one was shut down in 2018. Now we have this one, ProgDad TV. And it does say that, you know, violating our rules against abusive behavior, but of course they don't get any more specific, but there you go. Notice at the bottom, they're characterizing this as a permanent suspension. Now let's have a look at this controversial article by Lenahan. It is headlined, "It's Not Your Imagination. The journalists writing about Antifa are often their cheerleaders." Notice, folks, I would say they actually are Antifa. I mean, by their definition, they are. They're not just supporting them. They're working with them. They are them. Let's have a look here where it says Antifa often receives media coverage that is neutral or even favorable, with its members' violence either being ignored by reporters or vaguely explained away as a product of right-wing provocation. What's more, anecdotal evidence has suggested that many of the mainstream reporters who are most active in covering Antifa also tend to enthusiastically amplify Antifa's claims on social media. In October 2018, my research partner and I decided to investigate the truth of this impression by using a mix of network mapping and linguistic analysis to see which prominent journalists who covered Antifa also were closely connected to leading Antifa figures on social media. We then inspected the Antifa-related stories these journalists had written. We created a data set of 58,254 Antifa or Antifa-associated Twitter accounts based on the follows of 16 verified Antifa seed accounts. Using a software tool that analyzed the number and nature of connections associated with each individual account, we winnowed the 58,254 Antifa or Antifa-associated Twitter accounts down to 962 accounts. This represents a core group of Twitter users who are connected in overlapping ways to the most influential and widely followed Antifa figures. Of these 962 accounts, 22 were found to be verified, of which 15 were journalists who work regularly with national-level news outlets. I'd like to point out that if this is valid and accurate, and I'm not claiming that it is, but if it is, that is note the ratio. 15, not just 15 journalists, but 15 on a national level, okay? That would be approximately 1.56%, a little over 1.5% of 962. So that would mean a little over 1.5% of those Antifa Twitter accounts are national level journalists. And I would imagine that it's a lot less than 1.5% of the general population that are national level journalists. It would be a very small percentage. So this statistical feature would indicate, I think, or suggest that many people are attracted to what they call anti-fascist action and also attracted to infiltrating the media and passing off far-left propaganda as news. Now, for a lot of us, this stuff is a no-brainer. Yes, there are a lot of people who are attracted to posing as journalists and attracted to Antifa. We all know that, yes, blah, blah, blah. But it's good to actually have some research to demonstrate this. Especially, because there's a lot of people out there who have lives and they don't just study these things and know these things. They have to be convinced through evidence and reason. So again, 1.5% of these Antifa Twitter accounts are national level quote-unquote journalists, propagandists, okay? That is a shockingly high percentage, right? The general population of America is millions of people. So national level journalists are going to be a vanishingly small fraction of a percent. Anyway, he continues, it should be stressed that a journalist's close social media engagement with any particular group should not be seen as incriminating per se. I'm glad he said that. That's very important. I realize that, and many of us out there who keep tabs on these people realize that too. He continues, many journalists follow and even interact with all manner of figures online, either out of personal curiosity, professional interest, or even as a means of developing sources. In identifying this group of 15 journalists whose engagement with Antifa is especially intense, our goal was not to accuse them of bias out of hand, but rather to identify them for further study. so as to determine if there was any overall correlation between the level of their online engagement with Antifa and the manner by which these journalists treated Antifa in their published journalism. You can see this neat map here, by the way. Notice, for example, Kitty Stryker, remember from the pastel block in past videos. That correlation turned out to be quite pronounced. Of all 15 verified national level journalists in our subset, we couldn't find a single article by any of them that was markedly critical of Antifa in any way. They continue in all cases, their work in this area consisted primarily of downplaying Antifa violence while advancing Antifa talking points and in some cases quoting Antifa extremists as if they were impartial experts. These journalists include, for instance, Kid O'Connell, a self-identified, quote-unquote, proudly anti-fascist, quote-unquote, gonzo journalist whose work often reads like a FAQ that one might find on an Antifa website. That's so true. This guy's a clown. You may remember Kid O'Connell as this asshole in past videos of ours.
This asshole?
He's such an asshole. And he's not your typical, I mean, he's your typical Antifa, but he's just more pronounced of an asshole than most.
I'm not making you justify it. That was just too perfect. Like, and this asshole.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and this asshole.
I usually refer to him as a stark raving mad lunatic or something like that. But I figured I'd break it up a little. I'm glad you find that to be funny.
I do.
He also discusses Patrick Strickland, another journalist who is among the 15. His book, Alerta, Snapshots of Europe's Anti-Fascist Struggle, has a blurb written by Mark Bray, the author of Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook that I hold in my hand right here. Unlike O'Connell, Strickland presents himself as a serious mainstream journalist and has written for The New Republic and Politico. As of this writing, he is listed on Al Jazeera's website as a senior producer for Al Jazeera English. A more prominent example is Jason Wilson, a Portland-based writer for The Guardian. They write a lot about Antifa, and it's, as I've shown, propaganda. One of his recent articles focused on a U.S. regional intelligence report whose authors conclude that Antifa and the far right share responsibility for street violence. Quote, experts say the report mischaracterizes the dynamics of the street violence, unquote, Wilson complained. One of Wilson's main quote-unquote experts in this piece, it turned out, was none other than Antifa's handbook author Mark Bray, who, predictably, denounced the report's contents as quote-unquote ludicrous. What?
It's like asking the cat, did you eat the bird?
Yes. Yep. Just so you know, folks, the author of this book, Mark Bray, is not just someone writing about Antifa. He makes it very clear he is sympathetic to, and is by definition, Antifa himself. Lenihan continues, in fact, Bray makes regular appearances in Wilson's articles, so does fellow Portland resident and eco-extremist Alexandra Reed Ross, who regularly writes for Antifa publications such as the It's Going Down anarchist news site. And I think calling it a news site is, well, I mean, they give information for how to do activism, when and where to meet up to attack innocent people, but, a lot of what they say is just flat-out propaganda. Interestingly, while other Portland journalists such as Genevieve Reum, of KATU News, Maggie Vespa of KGW News, and Quillette's own Andy No, who has voiced concerns about Antifa's actions, have been harassed and assaulted by Antifa activists, Wilson seems welcome to mingle freely among Antifa, and has even been photographed standing close to Marquez. Now, this is significant, folks, because Antifa tends to try to stop people from filming. Either they put their hand in front of the camera, or they attack them, or they smash the camera, whatever the case may be. In fact, Marquez recently had to go to court for doing just that, smashing someone's camera. I think after assaulting the cameraman. Now, the fact that Louis Marquez is not trying to block this guy's camera, or worse, strongly suggests that this guy is regarded by the mob as one of them, or at least in support of them, and hence he has a free pass. That is unusual. Lenihan continues in one piece titled, How the World Has Fought Back Against the Violent Far Right and Started Winning, Wilson effectively drops the pretense that he is a neutral reporter and approvingly outlines the Antifa tactics set out in Bray's book. This book, folks. He also defends such tactics as doxing, stalking, deplatforming, and shaming as valuable means to attack individuals whose views he dislikes. In so doing, he cites both Bray and Emily Gorsensky, who runs a doxing site called First Vigil, which shames individuals she deems to be fascists before they have received due process. Make no mistake, the original professed goal of of Antifa to oppose fascism is laudable, and there are no doubt many Antifa activists who still reject violent methods. Not so sure about that, but maybe. Moreover, there is nothing inherently wrong with being a journalist who has strong personal views about Antifa or about any other radical group, but Wilson is not simply a pro-Antifa activist who also happens to write for The Guardian. He actively leverages his role as a regular Guardian writer to promote Antifa, whitewash its violence, and signal boost its leaders, whom he presents as quote-unquote experts, often under the guise of neutral news reporting. Christopher Mathias, a senior reporter for the Huffington Post, applies the same cynical approach. Like Wilson, Mathias' bylines seem to pop up whenever Antifa stages violent protests, and he always can be counted on to deliver a play-by-play that favors Antifa. But he goes even further than his Guardian counterpart. Unlike Wilson, Mathias actually doxes individuals who he suspects of being right-wing extremists. His doxing sources for an article about suspected extremists in the USA military included Unicorn Riot, Unicorn Riot or Antifa, an anarchic Antifa journalist collective, and other shady sites that exist as a sort of in-house 4chan for the Antifa movement. Mathias's apparent modus operandi is to gather doxes of individuals whom Antifa or Antifa-friendly groups suspect of being right-wing extremists. He or a colleague at Huffington Post then reach out to the target's employer asking for comment, leveraging the media's outlet's name to ensure the individual is called out. Then Mathias posts the doxes in his column while investigations are ongoing. As with Emily Gorsenski's First Vigil site, Mathias broadcasts detailed personal information whose release seems designed to destroy the reputation of the accused, not the guilty, the accused, no matter the results of any subsequent investigation. It's unclear how this behavior differs from ordinary, everyday Antifa-style online activism. It really doesn't. Lenihan continues, of course, all investigative journalists rely on tips from the general public, but collecting tips isn't what Wilson and Mathias appear to be doing. Like other prominent writers whose names appear among the 15 journalists most closely engaged with Antifa, they seem to function not at professional arm's length from their sources, but rather as cogs in an activist enterprise that churns out both pro-Antifa propaganda and doxing information about real or imagined ideological enemies. Their allies in this mission include trolls such as Antifash Gordon. You may know this Twitter account from a number of my past videos. The pseudonym of a Twitter user who declared that, quote, I expose fascists, get them fired, dehomed, kicked out of school, etc., unquote, and brags that he passes, quote, dossiers, unquote, of doxes to national level journalists whom he refers to as, quote, our contacts, unquote. His entire online mission is to ruin other people's lives, and it is a mission being supported by, quote unquote, contacts like Mathias and Wilson. In providing such support, they are discrediting their publications and misinforming their readers. There is no doubt in my mind that many of the individuals targeted by Antifa trolls and protesters do indeed harbor noxious, hateful, bigoted, and even fascistic opinions, but the intellectual dishonesty and disreputable methods being used to target these individuals is an example of the cure being as bad as the disease. Unfortunately, in this article, Lenihan doesn't give us the means by which we can verify his claims, but he may release that stuff in the future in the form of a paper, a peer-reviewed scientific journal paper. At least that's what they're saying. Apparently, some of the details have been shown to Quillette and other media companies, according to the Daily Caller. This is the end of part 1. To make sure that you see part 2, subscribe to us on BitChute. You can't rely on YouTube, and our days on YouTube are numbered anyway, so see the link below to our BitChute channel. Liberty, strength, honor, honesty, justice, truth, and love. Thanks for watching.